Welcome to String Scale Models. I'm Jason, your host, and I do models and apparently electronics. What's that about? We are doing our next part of our Make Electronics series. Not really an experiment in this one. This one is some basic stuff where it's getting more serious. And then this is, talks about the necessary items you need for this, like a power supply and some other things. And we're going to take a look at the kit from ProTech Trader here. We got the kit right here for ProTech Trader. This is experiment 12 through 24. So we're going to take a look at what's in here, and then we're going to go through a little bit of this book to get us up to experiment 12 and see what else we may need. Power supply, I have that taken care of with my singlet test equipment that you see there. So let's take a look at what ProTech Trader has in their Make Electronics 2nd edition, experiments 12 through 24. So we have two PCBs here and a thank you card. Two PCBs for doing some soldering. We have a 74HC000, which is a 2-input NAND gate, quad 2-input NAND gate. I have a series on logic on my channel. You can check out about logic gates. We have another 2-input AND gate, 74HC08. Then we have the OR gate, 74HC32. Then we have a 74HC393, which is a binary counter. I've talked about those. We have a triple input NOR gate, 74HC27. And then we have a quad 2-input NOR gate, which is 74HC02. We have a couple of 555 timers. They're always fantastic. We have, it appears to be 3 CD426 CMOS decade counters. And then we have a grouping of 3 different colors of hookup wire. And then we have another 9-volt battery connector here. So that covers this side of the little kit here. And then I believe you still need stuff from your first kit. I'm not sure. We have some solderable crocodile clips here, little alligator clips. We have some rosin core electronic solder. We have a assortment of capacitors, so maybe we don't need the stuff from the other kit. Another assortment of ceramic caps, that's electrolytic. Looks like some low ESR caps in here as well. We have some 3 7-segment displays. We have 2 bags of buttons here, so 8 total buttons. We have some slider switches here, single pole, double throw slider switches. We have some potentiometers, a 10K, 100K, and a 20K. We have a bag of 2N222 NPN transistors, large assortment of carbon film resistors, my favorite kind. We have a voltage regulator. Let's see if we can pull a number off of that. This is a L70805, so it's a 5-volt voltage regulator. We have some diodes here, 1N4148 diodes and 1N4001 diodes. These are Zener diodes here. They can be reverse biased. We have some 2 bags of red LEDs, 2 bags of green, 1 bag of 2 green LEDs, and then we have diffused yellow 2 LEDs, and then we have diffused low current LEDs. So I'm interested to see what these low current LEDs are. There's 3 bags of those, so that's interesting. And then we have some heat shrink tubing. So that is what is in the kit from ProTech Trader. This is for experiment 12 through 24. for the Make Electronics book. And let's see what else we're going to have to come across here for on our own. So power supply, you can continue to use a 9-volt battery, but they're saying an AC adapter puts out a steady 9 volts. This one has a switching. Let me tone that down a little bit so you can see it better. There we go. So let me just come in here a little bit. So we had, universal adapter, things like that. We have a power supply. And then it says we need a low-powered soldering iron. I have a soldering iron. I'm going to be using this TS100 right here. I have a lot of these TS products, so it's confusing sometimes. TS100, or I'll use the TS80P USB one. I also have my Extronic soldering station, so that's not an issue. Talks about different kinds, the stick kind, the gun kind. These are a little bit more high heat. Helping hands, I have one of those. So let's take a look at my helping hands that I have. This is just cheap here. It has way more on it than I need. It's got a magnifier, a light I don't use, and the helping hands, and a spot for your soldering iron. I don't particularly use that. I don't see that it says in here, but I use a fume extractor. It's good to use a fume extractor. And then some magnifying elements. I have a microscope, and there was a magnifier on my helping hands. Additional clamp-on test leads. I have plenty of test leads. Then it says optional. You can get a heat gun for heating the heat shrink. I have my hot air station for that. And then some desoldering equipment, like a desoldering pump. I have a desoldering pump. It's not at hand right now. And then a soldering stand to hold your soldering iron. That's this right here. That's no big deal. That's all optional. And then miniature hand saw, hobby saw. I have those for my scale modeling stuff. Deburring tool for smoothing and beveling out plastic and aluminum and things like that. I probably have one in my drawer right there. Optional, some calipers. I have a pair of calipers down in the drawer below. Essential item solder, that's in the thing. Heat shrink, copper alligator clamps we saw. The optional perforated board, we have that. And then it says plywood, machine screws, some project boxes. I actually have some project boxes, so they're not at hand right now. And then some power connectors. I actually have power connectors. Wow, I have a lot of this stuff. Headers. I have these headers. These are turn pin headers. I love turn pin headers, so I have plenty of those. And then the components, it just talks about some diodes. I'm sure we're going to need all the... these are additional components to what we already have. And it talks about the two different diodes, the Zener and the 1N4001. And then the next experiment is experiment 12, and it is going to be joining two wires together. And it's going to teach us how to solder. We're going to need hookup wire, cutter, strippers, soldering iron. Well, how many different soldering? It says 2 different soldering irons. Well, thin solder. No. Optional medium solder. Helping hand to hold your work. Optional heat shrink tubing. Heat gun optional. Heavy piece of cardboard or to protect your... Yeah, I have a silicone mat, so that's what the plywood's for. And it talks about soldering irons do get hot. Yeah, talks about your first joint. It doesn't talk about flux. I'll be introducing flux to make a better joint. So I'm going to have to change my soldering tip for this stuff. And then it talks about, different ways to solder some wires together. So, and then it talks about soldering myths. Soldering is very difficult. That's not true. Millions of people do it. Myths: soldering endangers your health with poisonous chemicals. And it says you should avoid inhaling the fumes, but that also applies to everyday products such as bleach and paint. You should wash your hands after handling solder, and to do a really thorough job, use a nail brush. But if soldering was a significant health hazard, we would have seen a high death rate among electronics hobbyists decades ago, which is very true. Don't inhale the flux fumes, though. That's not good. And it says soldering irons are dangerous. Soldering irons are less hazardous than the kind of iron that you use to iron your shirt because it delivers less heat. In fact, in my experience, soldering is safer than activities in the typical home or basement workshop. Of course, it doesn't mean you can be careless. The iron is hot enough to burn your skin if you touch it. So, and then it talks about 8 soldering errors, not enough heat. Carrying the solder to the joint, too much heat, not enough solder. Moving the joint before the solder solidifies, dirt or grease. Carbon on the tip of your soldering iron, inappropriate materials, failure to test the joint. So then it's background soldering alternatives. Then we're going to talk about doing our second joint, which is a lap joint. Do they actually call this a lap joint? Could be a butt joint. It just says parallel with each other. It doesn't say the actual name of the joint. Did they? Let's see what they got here. This is just a weird way of connecting wires in an X fashion. They're not actually labeling what these type of joints are. So. Okay, so we can do all this stuff. A little basic soldering here. And then, and it talks about heat transfer. If you just touch a little bit of the tip, you're not going to get good heat transfer. But if you lay the whole tip down, you're going to get better heat transfer. And then it talks about we can insulate the solder joint with our heat gun. Caution, heat guns do get hot. That's why it's called heat gun. Hot air station. And then we get into cutting and measuring the power supply. I'm not going to hack up a power supply at all. This talks about repairing electrical leads here, and then soldering those wires together, heat sinking them. And then the next experiment is roasting an LED. So let's go up here and let's do some. I'll do some quick basic soldering. I'll use this method here. So I'm gonna grab my TS 80P because it has my chisel tip on there. So you can see that, and I'll bring you in here and brighten the image up a little bit. And I will get this out of the way, and I'll bring in my helping hand here. So let me get that together like so. Okay, we'll bring that in there, get this out of the way. Should I bring in the side camera? Let's bring in the side camera. So let's bring in the side camera. So there's that. Let me get this soldering iron heated up. So I'm going to set it to a higher temperature. So there we go. We'll put it, no, we're not going to put it in there. Okay, so we need to get us some wire out of here of, we'll just use, no, I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to grab some wire off of my little thing of wire here. Grab my cutters. I have my cutters here, and I'm just going to take some of this green wire and cut a piece off. Cut it in half. And then I'm going to strip back a little bit. There we go. We'll strip about that much. There we go. Strip about that much, and then we'll clamp it in here like so. Clamp it in here. Let me just get this all lined up here for you guys. Okay, so is that in the shot all lined up? My soldering iron should be hot. I'm going to grab my thicker solder because I don't need the thin stuff. So I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to touch it to these two right here. I'm going to add a little bit of solder to my soldering iron. And I'm going to flow these two joints here. And I'm getting a little bit of there we go. Let that cool down, and that is soldered together. We'll check that. Now that is bonded together, so we'll get the helping hands out of here. I'll go ahead and warm up the hot air station, and we'll see about putting in some heat shrink here. Where is the heat shrink? There it is. Let me just grab my heat shrink tub here. So I have different variety of heat shrink. Let me zoom you out a little bit. So here's my heat shrink right here. This looks like it's the thinnest I have. Is this stuff here. This orange is that's what I'm going to use. See if this goes on there. It does. So put this on there like so. Then I'm going to grab my heat gun. That is probably way too hot for this, but I'll hold it kind of far away. And I will heat this heat shrink up. Now this is 2 times heat shrink. I normally use 3 times heat shrink. You know, it shrinks 3 times smaller. But this is what's in this drawer, and I didn't feel like digging out my 3 times stuff. So that is done. Put my hot air gun back. And then that is heat shrunk on there. And we have a repaired joint that's not going to come apart. So that is basically soldering 2 wires together and covering it in heat shrink. That is experiment 12 done. So we joined ourselves some 2 wires. We will move on to experiment 13 in the next episode. I hope you're enjoying this Make Electronics series. I have this book and another book to get through. And a whole other kit. There's a kit number 3 for the ending part, and there's a pretty cool project box and an experiment to do at the end. So hopefully that will go. This one's a short one because it's just, you know, basically going over what we're going to need in the future and just some simple soldering. Thank you so much, guys. Here is the links to social media, links to my Patreon page, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you.